move to question time, and I'll call Senator Cash.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Do you agree with the Minister for Trade and Tourism, Senator Farrell, that the United States is not Australia's most trusted ally? And if not, will you call on Senator Farrell to withdraw his controversial remark?
Senator Wong.
I welcome the question from the acting leader for the opposition. I would note that that demonstrates yet again why those opposite are not fit for government, that they are not interested in the major geostrategic challenges of the day, they're not interested in cost of living, and they want to continue to focus on an issue which Senator Farrell has responded to. I think we all know that the Kiwis are family. We all know that. Everyone also knows the United States is our closest ally and our principal strategic partner. And generally under both parties of government, there has been a bipartisan support for the ANZUS alliance, for the US alliance.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Farrell.
Point of order, President. I can't hear the minister's response.
Thank you, Senator Farrell. I have been calling the chamber to order. Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Please continue, Senator Wong.
I have been in this portfolio and in the shadow trade portfolio previously, and I have seen on both sides of politics bipartisan support for the US alliance, a contribution from both sides of politics to ensuring it continues to be deep and strong and modern, and that Australians continue to gain the benefit of that relationship with our principal strategic partner. But on a range of fronts this week, what we have seen is this opposition seeking to play partisan politics with the US alliance, which I think demonstrates yet again that under the wrecking ball that is Mr Dutton, they are prepared recklessly to politicise anything, recklessly to fight about anything, regardless of whether or not it's good for the country. They're not fit for government.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash, first supplementary.
Thank you. And how do Senator Farrell's remarks help to secure the transfer of knowledge and technology from the United States that the AUKUS partnership depends upon?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
And again, what I would say to Senator Cash, maybe she should be winding back some of the people on her side who are trying to undermine our engagement with the United States, including in ensuring that the Congress passes legislation to give effect to AUKUS. There are some things that should be above politics.
Minister Wong. Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Cash.
Point of order in relation to relevance. The question goes to Senator Farrell's remarks as a government minister, not anybody in the opposition. You are in government.
Order across the chamber. You also went to the AUKUS arrangements, which Senator Wong was speaking about, so I believe she is being relevant to the question.
You talk about AUKUS, you put AUKUS on the table, and then you get annoyed when I defend it. I mean, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. We are doing the work on this side of the chamber, and in Washington, and in the United Kingdom, in order to ensure that we assure a capability and a relationship that, in the context of a relationship which is so important for Australia's security. And what we have across the chamber is a party led by a wrecking ball who is prepared to politicise. I'm speaking of Mr Dutton, not you, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Senator Wong. The time for answering has expired. Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Thank you. And Minister, you often said that, and I quote, "In diplomacy, words matter." Do you still believe that in diplomacy, words such as the one that Senator Farrell used on Monday and has refused to withdraw matter? And if you do, then why won't you act?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Order. I'm not calling the minister until there's order. Order. Minister Wong.
The Shadow Minister might want to recall those famous words, "I don't think I know," when she reminds us about diplomacy. But what I would say to the senator, we know you are confecting an argument where there is none. We know that for the third day now, you are confecting an argument where you know that the Kiwis are a family, and you know that the commitment to the US alliance is unshakable on this side. But you are deliberately seeking to confect outrage at a time where we are hosting the UK Foreign Secretary and Foreign Secretary and Defence Secretary, because we are serious about making sure that we deliver AUKUS, we deliver the technology transfer, we deliver a sovereign capability, and we will ensure we do all we can to assure Australia's security in these times.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator Hughes, I'm going to ask you to withdraw those comments. Thank you. Senator Marielle Smith.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Minister Gallagher. Cost of living relief has been the Albanese Labor government's #1 policy focus since coming to office, because Australians are doing it tough. Today, the latest labour force figures were released, which show that the number of Australian jobs increased in February. Can the Minister please update the Senate on these figures and what they tell us about the current state of our economy?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Smith for her question and again for focusing on cost of living and on jobs for the Australian people. I do note the fact that we're not getting any questions on either of those subjects from those opposite. Today's remarkable jobs figures, the labour force figures that were released today, really are extraordinary, showing that the unemployment rate has been revised down to 3.7%, substantially down on last month's, and again showing the record level of job numbers, 790,000 jobs, 790,000 jobs that have been created under this Labor government. 790,000 jobs. So when we talk cost of living, we know that getting wages moving and getting people into jobs so they can work more and earn more has been a key focus of our economic plan. Today's new job figures show 116,500 new jobs were created in February. What we're also seeing is that we're seeing inflation moderate, our employment rate remaining incredibly resilient. We've had a welcome pause on interest rates. We're seeing wages growth for the first time in a decade. These are all really important measures to make sure that, along with our other policies on cost of living, people are earning more, people are working more, and under our tax cuts, they will keep more of what they earn. And we know those opposite hate it. They hate the fact that there's been 790,000 jobs created under this Labor government's economic plan. And in addition to that, our cost of living measures, combined with these incredible results, mean we are doing what we can to support people through this time.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Smith, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. South Australians have told me that the Albanese Labor government's support for cost of living pressures that they've been facing has been some welcome relief, and in particular they've been supportive of Labor's tax cuts for all taxpayers. Can the Minister please outline the impact of the labour market results for my home state of South Australia?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Gallagher.
And I thank Senator Smith for that, and again for her focus on making a difference to her community. 100% of taxpayers in South Australia will get a tax cut on the 1st of July. And when you look at the labour market figures, absolutely incredible results in your home state, Senator Smith. In fact, it shows that South Australia's unemployment rate has fallen to 3.2%. This is the lowest rate in South Australia since 1978. It's an incredible result. Since 1978, South Australians haven't seen an unemployment rate that low. When we came to government, the South Australian unemployment rate was 4.7%. When we look at the average unemployment rate under the Labor government, 3.7%. Since we came to government, it was 5.6% under the coalition government. We're better on wages, we're better on jobs, and we're better on cost of living relief.
Senator Marielle Smith, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, the policies you have outlined demonstrate the significant work on cost of living that the government has been undertaking since the election. We know the next federal budget is in May. How will the government continue to provide cost of living relief in this budget?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Smith for that question. Well, as I said in my previous answer, the centrepiece of our cost of living relief and assistance in the budget will be the tax cuts, where 100% of Australian taxpayers will get a tax cut from the 1st of July, and the overwhelming number of them will get a bigger tax cut than they would have got under the former plan. But we know there is more work to do. We know people are still feeling the pressure of that high rates of inflation that is moderating, and that is welcome. And our strategy will continue to focus on that, providing relief where we can, where it's affordable and it won't add to inflation, repairing the budget, and of course making investments where we can in the economic growth of the country, the future economic growth of this country. And we know under the opposition, who have nothing but negativity, we know inflation would have stayed higher, wages would have stayed lower, and there would be more debt that the Australian government would be managing. So our economic plan is working, President.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Wong. Overnight, the Biden administration in the US has significantly watered down their fuel efficiency standards and backed away from aggressive EV targets. Instead of requiring 2/3 of car sales to be electric by 2030, it's understood the new rules reportedly set the target as low as 35% EV sales by 2032. Labor's proposed family car tax has set a much more aggressive rate of emission reductions than the American scheme. Will the government admit it's got its proposal wrong and commit to changes that will not increase the cost of buying cars for Australians?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank the senator for her question, and I would say take the opportunity to point out, because I understand this has been a subject of some questioning in the time I haven't been able to be here, that obviously Australia lags the US and most other developed countries when it comes to vehicle emission standards. And I'm sure that the senator would be aware that it is important for us to join the rest of the world and comparable economies in terms of vehicle efficiency standards. I note that we have had a consultation process. I understand that the ministers are working closely with industry to integrate sensible suggestions into the legislation. We have obviously taken note of changes made to the US standards which were announced this week. These are one of the matters that the government will be considering as we finalise the policy. I'm sure that the Minister for Transport and the Minister for Climate Change and Energy will be happy to consider sensible suggestions to ensure the policy does what it is intended to do, and that is to give Australians more choice of vehicles that cost less to drive, more choice for vehicles that cost less to charge. So, and I'll take the interjection from the senator is interesting, because it seems to suggest that putting in place something analogous or similar to what other developed countries has will somehow cause the sky to fall in. Will somehow cause the sky to fall in. And I'm reminded of, you know, the long history of hyperbole on that side when it comes to climate policy. We remember, don't we, the Whyalla wipeout and the $100 roasts. I mean, you know, Barnaby Joyce has certainly ensured that members of the National Party and parts of the Liberal Party certainly exaggerate.
Thank you, Minister.
But
The
we
time
will
for
continue to
answering
be
has
sensible.
expired. Senator Mackenzie, first supplementary.
Labor's proposed family car tax is more punitive than the US, as it applies to a larger range of utes and commercial vehicles. It'll force an annual emissions reduction rate nearly 8 times higher than's been the case in the United States, and it gives Australian consumers and auto dealers less time to adapt. Today the US has backed down from its scheme. Why is the government punishing Australians for their car choices in the middle of a cost of living crisis?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Minister Wong.
I'm interested that the only reference to cost of living is a political flourish at the end of a question about something else, but we've had so few cost of living questions from those on the other side. They're much more interested in having a whole range of abstract or confected political arguments and actually talking about cost of living. But I again would say to the senator, we have had a consultation process. Our goal remains to provide a choice of cleaner, cheaper to run cars for all Australians who want them. We want Australians to have more choice in new cars, not less choice, and to pay less for fuel. Now, there's a lot of misinformation that's been perpetuated by those opposite, which is unsurprising. Because what we do know is even those on that side who over the years have taken a more sensible position on this issue, and I'm happy to come back and quote some of those on the opposition benches who've had a more sensible position, have been shouted down by Senator Canavan and Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Mackenzie, second supplementary.
Thank you. According to reports, the Biden administration has changed its tune and is now embracing hybrids to help reduce vehicle carbon emissions. Under Labor's proposed family car tax, popular hybrids like the Toyota RAV4 would be punished with penalties of up to $4,800 and even the hybrid Corolla by over $5,000. Why won't the government recognise the role that hybrids play in reducing emissions here in Australia rather than increasing their cost under the proposed emission standards?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Minister Wong.
Well, I know that Senator Mackenzie really can't wait, hasn't waited for the government to actually make a final decision on this before running on a fear campaign, a scare campaign about particular cars. And I again remind her that she's asking questions of reports from of US action in an economy that has had these sorts of standards for how many decades? Decades. I can't recall. Decades. And so the scare campaign, I think, falls a little short when we're reminded that, in fact, the United States, which she's asking about, has had these standards in place for many years. The government will take an appropriate
Minister
approach.
Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Mackenzie.
On relevance, Madam President, the question was about the role hybrids play in a low-emissions transport sector going forward, whilst being absolutely ruled out. And it's not me, it's not the US, it's actual economic modelling that says the case.
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. It also went to the Biden administration, so the minister is being directly relevant to your question. Minister, please continue.
So, if I may quote Mr Fletcher, so when fuel efficiency standards were first introduced, were introduced in the US, the most popular models before introduction stayed the most popular models after introduction. From Paul Fletcher, there wasn't a material change in price. We don't expect that there would be a material change in price here.
Thank you, Senator Wong.
These are your own colleagues.
Order. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister. Minister, racism systematically disadvantages and immensely harms people of colour. The dispossession and violence against First Nations that started with invasion continues to this day. 21st of March is marked world over as the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, IDIRD, which the Howard government replaced with Harmony Day to erase historic and ongoing racism in Australia. Then the Morrison government concocted Harmony Week, an entire week to whitewash the reality of racism. Not actively tackling racism at this time while hiding behind a mask of harmony is hollow and harmful, and it doesn't make us feel good. Minister, will the Albanese government replace the superficial Harmony Week with a meaningful week of anti-racism?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Wong. Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Order. Senator Faruqi and her party have listened in silence to questions asked by the opposition. And Senator Mackenzie in particular, you need to listen in silence. Minister Wong.
I had the opportunity today to go down to my department to speak about the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination and to launch a document, report that I'm very proud of, which is about trying to ensure that within the Foreign Service we not only ensure that everybody can be the best of who they can be and are not held back, but more importantly that we celebrate and make front and centre one of our great strengths as a nation, which is our diversity. That we bring the experience of First Nations people and that proud heritage to our foreign policy and to our diplomacy, and that we leverage and utilise and all of the talents of the diverse cohort which makes up the people who work for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So, Senator, and what I would also say to you is, it is what we do, it's what we all do to eliminate racism. It's what we do in our lives, it's what we do in this chamber, it's what we do in our workplaces, it's what we do on public transport, it's how we speak. And one of the things I would really encourage in this place is for us to try and speak as a collective, because I would hope that on this issue, we actually share values. And you know, my view, I don't. For me, what things are called, I personally don't have an issue with the word harmony, but I'm also happy to talk about the elimination of racial discrimination and my own personal experience of racism, and to try and empower those who still experience racism too often and so often, and to do all we can to ensure we live in a society, a world, and operate in this chamber in a way that is respectful and inclusive.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Faruqi, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, today is Closing the Gap Day, and we are nowhere near closing the gap. Last week marked 5 years since the Christchurch mosque massacre by an Australian white supremacist, yet we don't even have a national anti-racism strategy yet. Minister, will the government follow the Greens in establishing a stand-alone anti-racism portfolio in Cabinet to reckon with the seriousness of racism in this country?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Wong.
Can I just go to the last point? I think it's all of our jobs. I do. I think it's all of our jobs. I think racism is still pervasive. We know what it means. It derives from not seeing another person as seeing the other person as other and diminishing them and enabling. I really find it distressing that you are going to interrupt when I'm talking about this. You really...
Senator Wong, I ask you to direct your answers to the chair. Senator McKim.
That was going to be my point of order,
thank you.
Chair.
Have you finished your answer, Senator Wong? Senator Faruqi, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, Eid marks the day police massacred 69 peaceful protesters demonstrating against apartheid in South Africa. Australian governments was shameful supporters of white apartheid South Australia until Labor Prime Minister Whitlam took action. Minister, we are now witnessing an apartheid against Palestinians.
Senator Faruqi,
what
please,
will it take?
Senator Faruqi, order across the chamber. Order. Order. Senator Faruqi, I should not have had to ask you 3 times to resume your seat, but the interjections, particularly from my left side, were disgraceful. The senator has the right to ask her question in silence. Senator Faruqi, please continue.
Minister, what will it take for the Labor government to withdraw its support for the apartheid and genocidal state of Israel?
Thank you. Order. Order. Senator Faruqi, as I'm sure you're aware, that is a long bow to draw, and it's really up to the minister whether she answers that second supplementary or not, but I'm going to invite her to respond. Thank you. Minister, please resume your seat. There will be silence in this chamber. Minister Wong, please continue.
First, the senator would know we have been very clear about our call for an international humanitarian ceasefire, and of the importance of international humanitarian law. The senator, I am also disappointed that if the question begins with a discussion of racial discrimination, that you would go to as political an issue as that. But that's your choice. The third thing I would say, excuse me.
Order.
Excuse me.
Senator Wong, please resume your seat. I have asked for respectful silence. That is what I expect. Minister Wong, please continue.
Third point is this. We have a responsibility in this chamber to model how our democracy should operate, including where we hold very deeply felt different views. Because what brings us together as Australians matters more than that difference. And I want to place on record my disappointment at the way in which some of the very, frankly, abusive and extreme things we have seen are being condoned by some in this chamber. Thank you, Minister. The time for
answering has expired. Senator Ciccone.
Thank you very much, President. President, my question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Over the last month, we've had a number of visits from foreign ministers and world leaders, particularly from China to New Zealand, the United Kingdom and Southeast Asian nations. Minister, how do each of these incoming visits benefit Australia, and in particular, how the ASEAN-Australia Special Summit in Melbourne earlier this month will help boost economic opportunities for Australians and build peace and prosperity in our region?
Thank you, Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Can I thank the senator for his question and say that Australians expect and deserve a government that advances the nation's interests in a mature and serious way, and we've been very pleased to welcome a great number of high-level international visitors this year, including the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Papua New Guinea, New Zealand's newly appointed Foreign and Defence Ministers, 17 international ministers and a head of state at the Indian Ocean Conference in Perth, China's Foreign Minister yesterday, and today and tomorrow the British Foreign and Defence Secretary. And of course, earlier this month, Australia hosted a dozen world leaders from ASEAN and Timor-Leste at the Special Summit in Melbourne. Each visit is an opportunity to advance a more peaceful, stable and prosperous world, one in which we operate by rules, standards and norms, and where each country's sovereignty is respected and each country can pursue its own aspirations. The ASEAN Special Summit commemorated 50 years since Australia became ASEAN's first dialogue partner, another prescient decision by Labor Prime Minister Gough Whitlam. We agreed with ASEAN leaders a vision statement and a Melbourne declaration setting out practical cooperation and shared aspirations for the future, and there was a lot of discussion about how we boost economic engagement, accelerate the clean energy transition and increase maritime cooperation. Colleagues, Southeast Asia will be the world's fourth largest market after the United States, China and India by 2040. After the neglect of the previous government, the Albanese government is re-engaging with Southeast Asia. We've launched Invested, Southeast Asia's economic strategy to 2040. I thank Nicholas Moore for his work. We are creating opportunities for businesses and jobs, Australian businesses and jobs to grow. We've announced a $2 billion investment financing facility to boost investment in Southeast Asia, more trade, more jobs, more business for Australians and a stronger region.
Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thanks a lot. And Minister, yesterday you met with China's Foreign Minister for the 7th Australia-China Foreign and Strategic Dialogue. Could you please inform the Senate why dialogue and engagement are at the heart of the growing relationship between Australia and the People's Republic of China?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Our relationship with China is important and it is consequential. And a stable relationship between us doesn't just happen. It needs work, ongoing work, to advance our interests and to manage our differences. I was pleased to welcome Foreign Minister Wang Yi to Australia, the most senior visitor from China since 2017. We agreed to continue our constructive engagements on a range of issues including education, defence and trade, and to expand climate and energy cooperation. I welcome the progress of the removal of trade impediments and reiterated our desire for the removal of remaining impediments. I reiterated Australia's shock at the sentencing of Dr Young Jun and a range of other concerns, including the human rights of Uyghurs, Tibetans and other minorities across China. I also expressed our deep concerns that Hong Kong's new legislation will further erode rights and freedoms with potential impacts on individuals in Australia. Australians expect their government to pursue a mature and productive relationship in both countries' interests, and the Prime Minister looks forward to welcoming—
Senator Ciccone, second supplementary.
Thanks a lot, President. And with the UK's Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron and Defence Secretary Shapps in Parliament House today, I understand they will then be travelling to Adelaide tomorrow. What does the Minister hope to discuss with her UK counterpart during this visit?
Minister Wong.
I'm very much looking forward to welcoming Secretaries Cameron and Shapps to my hometown of Adelaide. Adelaide will play a key role in building the AUKUS fleet. It's set to create more than 8,000 jobs, and the Deputy Prime Minister and I will be showing them what South Australian shipbuilders can do. I'll be meeting with Foreign Secretary Cameron shortly, and we will sign 2 memorandums of understanding. One MOU will see Australia and the United Kingdom cooperate more closely when we respond to crises and major incidents. Recently, in Ukraine, in Sudan and the Middle East, Australia and the United Kingdom have worked together on the ground, and we want to build on this great work. The second MOU will focus on how we can work together to strengthen our shared efforts to help end gender-based violence, including in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. In our region and beyond, with traditional partners and new partners, the Albanese government is advancing Australia's interests.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Thorpe.
Thank you, President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Defence, Minister Wong. The Naval Nuclear Safety Bill currently before the Senate allows Australia to take on radioactive waste from the US and UK through the AUKUS deal, including high-level and military-grade radioactive waste. After many decades of nuclear submarines, the US and UK still have no solution to their nuclear waste. Is it the government's intention to use this power under the bill to take on foreign nuclear waste?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thank you to Senator Thorpe for her question. And I'm sure in the context of the committee debate there can be perhaps a more detailed answer. But what I would say is this. In our commitment to AUKUS, there was no deviation whatsoever from Australia's position, and in particular the position that the Albanese government has articulated, but I think the same position from those opposite when they were in government, our commitment to nuclear non-proliferation. And we made very clear that how we would handle the acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines would be to work very closely with the International Atomic Energy Agency to ensure we remained compliant with our obligations as a non-nuclear party under the NPT. So what I would say to you is we intend to apply the strictest standards. We are working very closely with Director General Grossi of the IAEA to ensure that is the case. And we have no intention of establishing a domestic nuclear industry in Australia. What we do intend to do is to acquire a nuclear-powered submarine capability.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Thorpe, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. A Defence spokesperson told a Senate inquiry last week that it is not the government's intention to take on foreign nuclear waste. If that is the case, will your government commit to amending the bill to remove any possibility of future governments hosting foreign nuclear waste in Australia?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Wong.
Senator, thank you for placing that on the record. I wasn't aware of the Defence officials' comments, and I'm grateful that they are consistent with what I have said. In relation to your proposition, I will take on board your proposal and refer it to the Minister for Defence. I would also say to you, if that is a commitment that is being sought, there are obviously other ways in which that commitment can be given in the chamber, but that's a matter that would need to be negotiated with the Minister for Defence, and I'll undertake to ensure that he is aware of your interest in this matter.
Senator Thorpe, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Does your $368 billion for AUKUS include the long-term costs of managing and disposing nuclear waste?
Minister Wong.
The figure that you have outlined, which did form part of the announcement, is a figure associated with the acquisition and sustainment of the capability. That is the submarine capability.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Askew.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. I refer the Minister to a statement made by the Tasmanian Labor leader, Rebecca White, that, and I quote, "We will make redevelopments at our major hospitals our highest priority for federal government funding in our first term, working with them to deliver these projects," end quote. Funding for these health infrastructure promises would likely run into the hundreds of millions, if not billions, of dollars. Has any requests been received for these announcements?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Askew for the question on the important issue of health. It's nice to get a question on such a significant matter. In relation to announcements from the Labor opposition in Tasmania, I'm not specifically aware of the announcement that you made, but we've made no secret of wanting to work with state and territory governments on delivery of hospital improvements, whether it be through services, and obviously there's discussions all the time with states and territories about hospital infrastructure. It was a key decision point and discussion point at National Cabinet late last year about the hospital reform agreement that's up for negotiation and the pressure that's on state and territory governments around that. So I don't think it's any secret that health systems around the country are under pressure. State and territory governments are finding it difficult to manage some of those pressures and are wanting assistance from the Commonwealth, which we're happy to engage in with
Gallagher,
the National Health.
Your seat. Senator Duniam.
A point of order, direct relevance. The Minister was asked about whether a request was received, and we've talked generally about health, and I haven't heard her say yet whether a request has been received from the Labor leader or not.
She did answer that specific point in the first sentence, and she is being relevant. So, Minister, please continue.
Is there an election on? Is there an election
Order,
on
order. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. And the Albanese government looks forward to working with the government of Tasmania, pending the outcomes of the election that's underway, when that occurs. And we will work together on health. We will work together on health infrastructure. We will work together on Medicare urgent care clinics. We will work together on workforce, which has been an issue in Tasmania, access to specialists, particularly access to primary care, to GPs, to new models of care. These are all things that the Minister for Health will work with whoever is the Health Minister. If there are particular policies that have been made by either side through the election campaign, the Commonwealth remains open and prepared to engage on all of those matters should they improve health service delivery in Tasmania.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Askew, first supplementary.
Thank you. So that sounds like a no. So given that you have not specified a date on which any such request has been received, is it the case that no request has been made?
Thank you, Senator Askew. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, we have discussions, as I said, with the opposition and government of Tasmania about pressing priorities. I've had discussions with Ms White. I've certainly had them around health. And when I've had the opportunity to meet with her, I know the Health Minister works across the Parliament in Tasmania about that. and I would think it's highly unusual that a Labor leader in any state, territory or federal jurisdiction would not go to the people of their state with a comprehensive policy around health, around hospital infrastructure and about improving services. We know they've been under pressure in Tasmania. And I think from what I've seen of the campaign, health is a critical issue, and I don't think it's any surprise that commitments are being made about that, and the Commonwealth remains open and prepared to engage once the people of Tasmania have had their say.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Askew's second supplementary.
Thank you. Can you detail any aspect of the Tasmanian Labor's health promises that the Albanese Labor government has agreed to fund?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, as I said in my previous answers, we will work with the government of the day in Tasmania to continue to improve access to health services for the people of Tasmania. It is not unusual for parties to go through election campaigns and make commitments, and when those commitments are endorsed and governments are elected, the Commonwealth will work with them. And it is, of course, in stark contrast to what happened when the Coalition was in power, when it went around cutting the hospital agreement, when they cut $50 billion under Peter Dutton's leadership. They cut money out. I was a territory leader then, and I remember what happened. We are prepared to invest. We are prepared to work with the Labor Party if they win government in Tasmania, just as we will be if the current government remains in place. Health services an important issue for any election campaign, and we look forward to working with either party pending the outcome.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Immigration, Senator Watt. Australia is experiencing the largest immigration intake on record. Australian Bureau of Statistics figures show 518,000 net overseas migrants arrived last year, and 55,375 migrants arrived in January this year alone. 55,375 migrants in 1 month, 40% higher than the previous January record way back in 2009. Minister, how many migrants is this government going to let in this year?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Roberts. The first thing I'd like to say is that the Albanese government is very proud of the multicultural nature of the Australian population. And I heard you earlier today in another debate, Senator Roberts, acknowledge that your own family has a fairly recent history of migration. And I think we should all recognise the very valuable contribution that migrants have played and continue to play in Australia. Having said that, we do acknowledge that there has been an increase in migration to Australia, particularly as a result of the pause to migration that occurred through the pandemic. The figures that have come out today are entirely expected and are consistent with the forecasts for net overseas migration that we set out in the mid-year budget review at the end of last year. Migration levels are expected to have peaked in 2022-23 and are forecast to drop in half by next year. So our government is doing the hard work, not done before under the former government, to bring migration back to sustainable levels after all comparable countries also experienced a surge post-pandemic. The changes that we made late last year are having a significant immediate impact. For example, student visa grants are down more than 35% on last year's level. And I know for a fact that, Minister O'Neill, Minister Clare, Minister O'Connor have been working very hard on trying to tackle some of the rorts that were left behind in the international student visa system, and that is having results with bringing those student visa grants down by more than 35% on last year's level. The data which has been released today doesn't take into account the very substantial actions that our government has taken to bring down net overseas migration, and that's because most of those actions were implemented mid-late last year. But we recognise this is an issue for Australians and we're taking action to deal with it.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. With people in Queensland, working families at real jobs, now living in tents, caravans, parks, cars, under bridges, there is a human catastrophe unfolding in this country, in our state. Will you suspend further immigration until everyone who is here now has a bed to sleep in and with a roof overhead?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Roberts. I absolutely acknowledge that our country has a housing shortage. We have acknowledged that since the day that we were elected and had to deal with the massive housing shortage and housing affordability crisis that was left behind by the former government. And that is exactly why we have been presenting a range of options to this parliament to deal with housing shortages, including the creation of the $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund. Now, Senator Roberts, for someone who says that we should have more housing to deal with this, I'm surprised that you and Senator Hanson voted against the Housing Australia Future Fund. And in fact, I was reminded that Senator Hanson, in the last 24 hours or so, has described the Housing Australia Future Fund as useless. So you continue to argue that we need more housing, just as the coalition argues for more housing, but when you have an opportunity to do something about it, what do? You vote no. And we know that you're intending to vote no to the Help to Buy legislation as well. So be consistent. If you want more housing, vote for it.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Minister, is immigration too high?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Roberts. Well, the government is already taking action to try to deal with the increase in migration that we experienced after the pandemic, just as all other comparable nations experienced after the pandemic. That's why we've made changes to student visa grants, down by more than 35% on last year's level, the settings that were left behind by the former government. That's why we've taken a range of other actions to fix the utterly broken migration system that was left behind by Mr Dutton, the former Home Affairs Minister, and yet again we're fixing up the former government's mess, while at the same time we're trying to build homes, even though we are obstructed every step of the way by the Coalition, One Nation and all too often the Greens Party. I heard an interjection before that people don't want public housing, they want home ownership. First, they do want public housing, and second of all, home ownership is exactly what we're trying to through our Help to Buy scheme. It's in the name, Help to Buy.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Sheldon.
My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management, Minister Watt. Given our country is facing more frequent and intense natural disasters, and as a result more Australians are now living in areas of high risk of floods, bushfires and cyclones, this increased risk has made insuring homes more expensive for many Australians. Minister, what is the Albanese Labor government doing to deliver tangible national action to reduce climate and disaster risks and put downward pressure on cost of living?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
It is a good question, Senator Davey, and I've got a very good answer as well. I'm very pleased, and can I also thank Senator Sheldon for his ongoing work as the Special Envoy for Disaster Recovery. I know that only recently he was in Far North Queensland, where he and Senator Green have both been doing terrific work to assist Far North Queenslanders recovering from the cyclones and floods that we've seen in the last couple of months. Since our election in 2022, the Albanese government has worked hard to ensure that Australia is much better prepared for natural disasters. Increased disaster risk is the single biggest contributor to the higher insurance costs that many households are experiencing. Rising insurance premiums is another cost of living pressure on Australians, which the former government allowed to spiral out of control. Without insurance, people face longer recovery times and need to rely on their own savings or funding from governments or charities to support recovery. And today I was proud to announce that in a world first, two of Australia's biggest insurers are now providing discounts to customers who complete a bushfire resilience self-assessment through the government-funded free Bushfire Resilience Rating app. Thanks to a $3 million investment from the Albanese government, Australians living in bushfire-prone areas have the science and power in their hands to improve their homes' resilience. And the discounts announced today by Suncorp and NRMA for high resilience ratings can be up to $500 off your premium for people living in the highest risk areas. This is real cost of living relief for Australians doing it tough. The higher the bushfire risks at a location, the higher the discount provided to customers who improve their homes' resilience. To date, 19,000 households have accessed the app since it was launched in October last year. Many of the recommended actions through the app cost very little or nothing at all. So this is a practical step with an investment by the Albanese government that is helping take some of the pressure off Australians with their insurance premiums.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
Minister, noting the Albanese government's investments are making Australia safer and more resilient to the impacts of natural disasters, what other measures have been implemented in the resilience space, and how are these investments helping with cost of living?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Sheldon. We know that investment in resilience and mitigation not only makes Australians safer when disasters strike, it also reduces the cost of recovery for governments and households. And with a massive $1 billion pipeline of resilience and mitigation investment over the next 5 years through the Albanese government's flagship Disaster Ready Fund, we expect to see these benefits continue to flow through to Australians in the coming years. On the other hand, the former government had to be dragged kicking and screaming to even acknowledge climate change, and we know there's a few of them who aren't quite there yet. Maybe by 2050 they might acknowledge climate change is happening, let alone did they ever invest in disaster risk reduction. They failed to act as natural hazards grew more frequent and intense, and their $4 billion emergency response fund didn't spend a single dollar on disaster mitigation, and their inaction is what's created the environment for rising risk and insurance premiums. The Albanese government takes these issues seriously.
Thank you,
We're
Minister.
making Australia better prepared.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Sheldon, second supplementary.
Minister, right now communities in the Northern Territory are experiencing severe weather following Tropical Cyclone Megan. Minister, can you provide an update on the current severe weather situation across Australia?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. Thanks, Senator Sheldon. We do continue to see severe weather occur in many parts of Australia, with the high-risk weather season not yet over. Even today, we see bushfires in some parts of Western Australia, floods in some parts of Queensland, but of course most focus is on the situation in the Northern Territory. In Borroloola, the MacArthur River, already at record-breaking a height of 17.6 metres, is likely to peak between 3 and 6 p.m. today. In response to requests from the Northern Territory Government, the Commonwealth has worked quickly to activate the ADF, and we've now approved a number of requests for additional assistance over the past 4 days. Around 200 vulnerable community members have been evacuated from Borroloola to Darwin in the past 24 hours, with planning underway for possible evacuations at Timber Creek, Ludgermanu, Kalkarinji and Pigeonhole. The level of flooding in Borroloola and across the Northern Territory is extremely concerning, and I encourage all community members to heed the advice of officials and take decisive action early. We'll continue to work with the Northern Territory Government to keep people safe.
The time for asking has expired. Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, can you confirm reports that the government has removed the Directors-General of ASIO and ACIS as regular attendees at the National Security Committee of Cabinet, and that they are now only invited on a case-by-case basis?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Thank you to Senator Patterson for his question. And he would know, and I'm sure he knew this when he stood to ask the question, that we don't disclose the workings of the National Security Committee of Cabinet. But what I would say to you is that both the Director, DG of both of those DGs of both of those organisations are fine officers, and their advice is sought and considered very carefully by government, and including by me. I'm aware that there have been some outside of this place who've chosen to be critical of some members of our intelligence community, and I would say, as a minister who has the opportunity to engage with and rely on their and consider their advice, they are highly professional, excellent officers, and we're very pleased that they work with us as well as they do.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Patterson, first supplementary.
I do welcome the Minister's defence of our professional public servants in the intelligence community. Minister, can you confirm reports that the Secretary of the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water is now a regular attendee of the National Security Committee? Why does the government think that he has superior insights on national security to the Director-Generals of ASIO and ACIS?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Wong.
I'm in a somewhat difficult position because we We don't comment on the workings of those committees, but I would say to you I had never heard that before until you raised it.
Senator Patterson, second supplementary.
There are media monitoring services available for such things, Minister. Thank you. It wasn't mine. Did the Prime Minister remove the heads of our intelligence agencies from NSC because they were telling him things he didn't want to hear? And will the Prime Minister commit to reinstating the heads of our intelligence agencies as regular attendees of NSC so they can provide the candid and considered national security advice that this government so desperately needs to hear?
Before I call the minister, Senator Watt, I'm going to ask you to withdraw those comments.
I withdraw.
Thank you. Minister Wong.
President, Senator Patterson is generally one of the more sensible members of the... Would you like me to say something else? I can arrange that for your pre-selection, mate, if you really need me to at some point. But he's generally one of the more sensible members of the opposition, and somebody who understands the importance of working together on national security. And frankly, that question is beneath him.
Senator Sterle. Order. I've got a senator on his feet about to ask a question.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Trade and Tourism, Senator Farrell. Over the 2 years since the Albanese Labor government was elected, great strides have been made in improving access into overseas markets for Australian exporters and products and lowering costs for Australian consumers on imported goods. Could the Minister please provide an update on how this progress has come about through a sensible approach to trade agreements and stabilising relations?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Thanks, Senator Sterle, for his question. And I know he understands just how important trade is, and tourism, to the Western Australian economy, as I imagine you do too, Madam President. The Australian economic prosperity is directly linked to open and stable international markets. 1 in 4 Australian jobs is related to trade. Jobs in export industries pay 5% more on average, and 27% of Australians' economic output is supported by trade. Under the Albanese Labor government, Australia has been recording remarkable trade surpluses, which means exports are rising faster than imports. For example, in January 24, the trade surplus on goods was $11 billion. $11 billion. $11 billion. In particular, exports. Exports from Senator Sterle's great state of Western Australia have benefited significantly from this government's steady hand on the trade tiller. The government is actively progressing a forward-leaning trade agenda by bringing priority agreements into force.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Seriously, Senator McKenzie, this is the chamber. We're not at a football match. Minister Farrell, please continue.
Thank you for that protection, President. The government is actively progressing a forward-leading trade agenda by bringing priority agreements into force and progressing ongoing negotiations. And the government is working hard to stabilise our trade relationship with China. Trade diversification is a central plank of the government's trade policy strategy. We need to deepen and diversify our trading relationship, particularly in our own region. Earlier this month, the Prime Minister hosted a special summit to celebrate 50 years of partnership with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It's an important event which enabled discussions on ways of deepening engagement in the region.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. The time for answering has expired. Senator Sterle, first supplementary.
Yes, thank you, President. I thank the Minister for his answer. I refer the Minister to recent reporting about an interim determination of China's review into tariffs on Australian wine exports, that the tariffs are no longer necessary. Could the Minister please outline to the Senate the work taken towards stabilising Australia's trading relationship with China?
Minister Farrell.
President, thank Senator Sterle for his supplementary question. I know there'll be many people, in particularly the Margaret River of Western Australia, who will be keeping and Swan Valley, beautiful, another beautiful wine area, But the Albanese Labor government is working hard to stabilise our relationship with China without compromising our principles. Sustained engagement and advocacy has led to positive developments in the trade relationship. Just ask Australian exporters in coal, cotton, copper ores, concentrates, timber, logs, oat and hay and barley. We welcome China's interim decision of the 12th of March that the duties on wine are no longer necessary. We expect China will complete its review and remove duties by the end of this month, allowing Australians quality wine, including those in the Margaret River and the Swan, to return to the some of those too, return to the Chinese market, and this has been a remarkable turnaround.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. And Senator Davey, my apologies to you. You were listening. I was actually referring to Senator McDonald. I think your jackets are the same colour. Senator Sterle, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister, for your answer. Recently, the Minister attended a ministerial meeting on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework with some of Australia's key trading partners. Could the Minister provide an update to the Senate on progress towards agreeing further pillars of the framework, including expected trade benefits for Australia?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Farrell.
Yeah, thank you, President, and thanks Senator Sterle for his supplementary question. Of course, with my good friends the Americans, I met my very good friends, the Americans.
Order.
The Indo-Pacific Economic Framework brings together 14 of the most dynamic and fastest-growing economies in the Indo-Pacific region, with members making up over 40% of global GDP. This month, I participated in a virtual IPEF ministerial meeting with my very good friend, the United States Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo, which involved the release of key text agreements. An important agreement under IPEF is the Supply Chain Agreement. When implemented, the Supply Chain Agreement will help address concentrations in critical supply chains and promote Australia's—
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Wong.
Questions be placed on notice.